Rob Edwards is set to be announced this week as Wolverhampton Wanderers manager. Now, I think it's very, very interesting that we speak about the reaction to this from Middlesbrough fans and Wolves fans alike, and also speak generally about how I think it's going to go down for Rob Edwards at the club. So please, please, please get in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on the appointment, because it will be confirmed either today or tomorrow. But I think it's absolutely massive news for Wolves and also for Middlesbrough, as well as we'll be discussing in this video. Also, before we get into it, there are 67% of you who watch these videos who haven't subscribed to the channel, so I'd very much appreciate it if you could do that. You just click the button that says subscribe below this video. It's completely free, it doesn't cost you anything, and it would really, really help me out. So let's get straight into this one. First of all, we're going to start with a little bit of a rant, to be honest, and I don't normally get irate or frustrated in these videos, but let's be honest, Luke Edwards has had an absolute nightmare. Now, Luke Edwards, if you're not aware, is someone who claims to be a journalist and quite frankly spouts a load of absolute nonsense when it comes to generally anything about football, really, but especially in this case, Rob Edwards. Now, he said that Rob Edwards has brought shame to the Edwards name because they've both got the same last name. He basically hopes that Wolves get relegated this season because of the way that Rob Edwards has acted. Now, how has Rob Edwards acted exactly now? Essentially, he goes on to say in this video that because he said that it's a family at Middlesbrough, which, by the way, I absolutely understand why Middlesbrough fans are frustrated about that. But equally, let's not forget, football managers are there to be employed and to be seen likeably to the public, to appease the fans that they're working for and the fans of the club and the owners that they're working for. Now, you may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't understand how this has absolutely been blown out of proportion, to be quite honest. I think, of course, leaving Middlesbrough in the position they're in is mental. I agree, and it may seem mental to a side that look like they will be joining Middlesbrough next season. If anything, actually, Middlesbrough will be coming up and Wolves will be going down. But I do think the fallout to it is all a bit crazy. Now, I'd get it if Rob Edwards was leaving Middlesbrough for, you know, maybe a West Ham who you could think would probably still go down, or a Burnley who you think are probably nailed on to go down this season. And it was a club that has no, you know, emotional connection to Edwards or anything like that. But you have to forget, you cannot forget, Rob Edwards has played over 100 games for Wolverhampton Wanderers. He has coached them at most levels as well. And he got his coaching badges there. He earned his stripes at Wolverhampton Wanderers. The fans are instantly on side at his appointment, most of them, which we will speak about in this video, a few that aren't as well. But generally, I think it's been massively blown out of proportion, to be honest. And I think Luke Edwards, I think personally, is an absolute disgrace to any of the people that put their time and their effort into learning to become a journalist. I spent 3.5 years of my life trying to become a journalist at university, and I would never spout as much nonsense as Luke Edwards has done on the BBC this morning. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, from a fan standpoint, I think it's very, very interesting. Now, I do completely understand Middlesbrough fans' frustration. I really do. In terms of the last few years, it's not been great. Michael Carrick's run ended pretty sourly. And to be honest, I think they missed the boat with Michael Carrick. I think he should have been the manager that got Middlesbrough back into the Premier League. He really should have done, especially in the first few years there. Some of the football they were playing, some of the way they were acting, some of the ways they were acting in the market, some of the players they were bringing in, it really should have happened for them. I think back to that Tubrak-Pom season, I think, to be fair, they probably should have capitalised on that season as well. But generally, I think they missed the boat with him now. Rob Edwards comes in and they have a really decent start this season. I think the last few games, they look pretty poor, to be quite honest. And, you know, the 3-0 loss to Watford was, quite frankly, a dreadful game of football. And don't get me wrong, Rob Edwards is not flawless tactically. As I've said, I think he is better tactically than Vitor Pereira. And I think, to be honest, it'd be quite hard to find a manager that's not in the current market, to be honest. But I do think that the Middlesbrough fan reaction is somewhat right. The rat thing and sort of coming out and saying that he's a rat and he's a liar and he's a cheater and all this load of nonsense, I don't personally understand, because at the end of the day, if he, like I say, if he was leaving to a club that isn't remotely, emotionally connected to him, then I would get it. But personally, I think it's all been a bit blown out of proportion for a manager that, let's be honest, they've got a decent fee for. They'll probably get in someone just as good for that level, and generally still have a very decent chance of going up. Now, of course, Rob Edwards has contributed massively this season to their success, but I do still think they will be fine going into next season and going into hopefully the Premier League for them as well. And I do wish Middlesbrough the best, because although their fans haven't acted very, very well in this whole saga, I do think that Middlesbrough are a big club and I'd like to see them back in the Premier League. Now, from a Wolves perspective, I want to speak about that. That's what you're all here for, so let's just break it down. Now, I think it's very split. A lot of the Wolves fans are very much accepting of the fact that, let's be honest, We think Wolves are going to go down. We're planning and succession planning for when Wolves go down with the appointment of Rob Edwards. And I do completely get that. I do understand that. I think if Wolves were to go down this season, which I don't think it's impossible, let's be honest, but I don't think it's also, I don't think it's impossible to stay up, but I don't think it's, it's unlikely for them to stay up, but I don't think it's impossible, as I say. So I think it's very interesting from that perspective. I think if they were to go down, I think Edwards would give them a good chance of getting back up. Now, you may say, but he got relegated with Luton and then went straight down again. And I do completely take that point, but I do think with this squad and the club and stuff like that, and hopefully Fosun will sell up at that point, I think they will. Whoever the new owners would come in would invest in him, and I think they'd be pretty decent. Now, in terms of investment, we have seen that Rob Edwards will be backed in January. Whether he's backed substantially, who knows? Whether it's an unbelievable January window or it's just a substandard one where ultimately they don't sign players that are good enough and then they end up going down regardless. It remains to be seen. Now, for me, I think Wolves need a solid right back. I know that sounds mad considering they've signed Chachua and Hoover is also at the club and Matt Doherty is also at the club. But for me, the right back area massively needs to be worked on. I think they need wide men. I think they're crying out for men on the wings, to be honest, on either flank. I think a creative midfielder is needed. Joao Gomez and Andre, as much as I love them both, they are too similar. Joao Gomez is still more adventurous than Andre, a lot more. But I do think there's a creative midfielder spot there, to be honest. It's there to be had. So I do think in terms of a squad, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Let's be completely honest. Will Rob Edwards get that work done in January? You hope. Will Fosun give him the money to do that? You hope. Will players leave in January? You probably hope as well, to be honest. I think the likes of Wang Hee-chan, I think you could do far worse than getting rid of Wang, to be honest. I think you could do far worse than getting rid of a lot of the squad. There's a few players in there that I personally wouldn't be keeping around. I think Herver could do with a move. Oh, God, who's going to take him? Who the bloody hell's going to take him? I don't know. But I think you could do with getting rid of him, personally. I think there's plenty of places in this squad up for improvement, let's be honest. And the lack of quality and depth, I think, is really alarming. When you look at some of the subs benches, I mean, Fer Lopez can't get in this team, and he must be sitting there thinking, what have I done here? What's gone so wrong for me to sign for 25 million euros this summer and to not get a kick, virtually not get a kick? Now, of course, he does get that assist, but since then he hasn't really had a kick. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see if he is backed in January. Let me know what you think about the January window as well, because I think there's a lot of positions that Wolves need to work on. And throughout this international break, there will be a lot of content about the Wolves side tactically, about the Wolves side going into the January transfer window, and about the Wolves side, what they need to improve ahead of the next test after the international break. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot of room for quality to be brought through the door. I mean, I really do struggle. I personally like the appointment of Edwards. I think it's smart if Wolves do go down. I think it's smart if they try and stay up. I think either way, it's a risk worth taking. I think if you want to get the fans back on side in the current dire state of affairs, I think this is the best time to do it. I think it's the best method to do it. But I do also think a lot of fans, and I do completely see this perspective, which we will just briefly speak about, in terms of there's a lack of real quality managers on the market, and Rob Edwards feels like middle of the park, maybe lower end, to be honest, of that. So, Ardi Huto was linked, Edin Terzic has been linked at times, Brendan Rodgers, not for me. Robbie Keane, again, I think he needs a bit more time at Ferencváros to really sort of do that. They're doing absolutely brilliantly in the Europa League this season as well. So I do think it'd be really interesting to see how it goes, who Wolves bring in the January transfer window. And I do think tactically Rob Edwards has a lot to get right, and he has to do a lot in a very, very short space of time. But I just think this international break is the biggest point in Wolves season, to be quite honest. I think it's the biggest point in Wolves season by some distance. There's got to be tactical tweaks. There's got to be working with players. I mean, the likes of Joao Gomez and Andre haven't made the Brazil squad, so that's crying out to be worked on. And they're two players that you really want sticking around and learning the system and learning how they're going to play and how you want them to play. So I think there's so many things that are exciting. There's a lot of risk with Rob Edwards. I want to make that abundantly clear. But there's so much exciting stuff that could also go on. So I do think it's one to keep an eye on. I do think what we see in maybe even little training videos and stuff like that throughout the international break, hopefully, because a lot of the players haven't gone to their national sides. I really hope that there's a drastic improvement, to be honest, in almost all facets of the game. So I really do hope you did enjoy this video. It's just a quick catch-up video. We'll be doing a few newsy type videos throughout the transfer window in the January as well, and we're doing a few of these throughout the international break as well. So I'd very much appreciate it if you did enjoy this video, to like the video, subscribe to the channel, as I said, as many of you aren't subscribed. If you want more of these daily, regular catch-up videos, just where I speak my heart from my heart and how I see the game and how I feel about things moving forward, then I'd very much appreciate it if you would let me know in the comments.